Hello. This is a walkthrough of our thesis paragraph exercise, which you have a copy of as well. The important thing to understand about the thesis paragraph is it is the building block of your paper. Whether you're writing a homework or you're writing a full essay, or even if you're just going to be writing a short exercise for me, this should always start with a thesis paragraph or a thesis statement. Thesis statements begin your body paragraphs, but a thesis paragraph itself is a specific paragraph. It's always the building block of what you write. Think about the thesis paragraph as your blueprint, your guide to what you are going to be proving to me over the course of whatever length of paper you are writing for me, the homework or the essay. So by the end of that first paragraph, I should know, what are you proving to me? How are you intending to do this? So as an example, what I have here is these are thesis paragraphs that I took from student essays, from student homework assignments they were all writing a homework. It was about the Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor, which all of you have now read. And the assignment that the students had was a compare contrast paper. And this homework was, which character in Everything That Rises Must Converge is more racist, Julian or his mother? And there was select one and prove. So essentially, this was a 5 paragraph homework. It was a compare contrast. First paragraph is the thesis paragraph. Second paragraph is body paragraph number 1. In that, they would the essential construction of this was character A is racist because. Next paragraph, character B is racist because it's important that we've got to create that shared understanding and language and comparison point before we keep running along. And then my fourth paragraph, which is, if you can be keeping track, that's my third body paragraph. This is where the comparison happens. Character A's racism is worse than character B's racism because, and that's that interpretive idea, because you're not just saying, oh, they're racist. You're making this interpretive idea of what makes one kind of racism worse, more harmful, more corrosive, more problematic than the other kind. Because obviously we know just from looking at it, Julian and his mother are not interchangeable. These people are racist. They're racist in different ways, though. That has different, effects on both themselves and also the people who are really subjected to their presence, who are operating in the sphere around them. And then final paragraph, conclusion, that last reinforcement of what you have argued to me over the course of this assignment. So I find this a very useful example because it's useful to kind of look at what students very much like yourselves were writing in response to this. And I find that using student, paragraphs also allows me to show a lot of kind of those common pitfalls and problems. So these are all samples that I took from 1 year of just 1 year. I just took everyone's homework assignment and I copied down their thesis paragraph. And this has given me a wonderful sample to give you guys. And so, remember that thesis paragraph was the blueprint and the guide to the entire written assignment. By the end of this paragraph, I needed to know what they were going to prove and how. And with this prompt, what I needed to know was, which character were they going to argue was more racist, Julian's mom, and what was the basis of that? What made one kind of racism worse? And what I've seen over and over is that when people can't write a good thesis paragraph, it's often because they're just kind of trying to fill space, or they don't know yet, or they're trying to figure things out, and the wheels come off the bus pretty fast, as we see. Now, one thing I do want you to keep in mind as we read through these, a very few common misunderstandings were when slavery entered the United States. That was 1865. So neither Julian or his mother were alive at any point when people were actively enslaved in the United States. Now, obviously, they were dealing with the fallout of that. We all deal with the fallout of that. And Julian's mother, in very likelihood, probably met people who had been enslaved, in their lifetimes, the children of that. However, by the time we get to Julian, we're a century after it. Julian didn't know anyone who was an enslaved person. He probably knew the children and grandchildren of them. So Julian and his mother never themselves, owned slaves. They never themselves, directly interacted with the enslaved. They, so we can't just say like, oh, Julian's mom owned slaves. No, she did not. So keep that in mind. That's a useful, like, little piece of historical background. So as you can see, I'm sharing my screen so you can see and follow along. So paragraph number 1. And I'm going to do a couple of these that give us some really good examples of this. But I also want you to go through and read and see, apply these basic questions. And you can really see which paragraphs are functioning and which are really not. Okay, so number 1, here's our first example. In the story, Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor, Julian's mother is the more racist character. O'Connor tells the story from Julian's point of view, and he despises his mother's racism throughout the story. It is clear to the reader that Julian's mother is the more racist through the not-so-subtle comments and conversations that occur throughout the story. Okay, so which character will the student be proven is more racist, Julian or his mother? Okay, we've got that answer. Julian's mom. Perfectly decent approach to this. What is the basis of the student's argument of what makes one type of racism worse than the other? Ooh, now we've got a problem, don't we? We don't have that. What we have is O'Connor tells the story from Julian's point of view, and he despises his mother's racism throughout the story. That's useless to me. The point of view character has nothing to do with you arguing why one type is worse than another. Doesn't matter how Julian feels. What are you arguing? So that's total. We could throw that out right there. It's clear to the reader that Julian's mother is the more racist through the not so subtle comments and conversations that occur through this. That doesn't help me. Why is one worse than the other? Not that, oh, she says racist things. That could be a support for why what she's doing is bad, but what is she doing worse than what he does? So what we have here is we have a very common problem where my writer did identify which character they were going to be arguing, but they don't have an argument yet, which became a problem very soon afterwards. Very soon. Okay, so let's look at number 2. This is a good one. In the short story, Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor, racial standards of old America clash with progressive steps of the new. Julian and his mother are the set pieces of this short story. Julian's mother, being brought up during the awful period of slavery, is stuck in her close-minded ways and comes off as racist. Julian, on the other hand, comes off as a revolutionary thinker, someone who cares about his fellow man and wants to do his part to make the new America a better place for all. However, as the story progresses, Julian starts to show his true colors. His view becomes more cynical, more contradictory, and less caring of his fellow man as a whole. Unlike Julian, his mother is a product of her environment. Being brought up around slavery, her calling a black person a Negro was like calling a frog by its name. Being brought up in the era, she was bombarded with twisted beliefs. She had no outlets to steer her in the right directions, nor did she have positive, progressive people around her while she was growing up. Julian is more of a racist due to the fact that he chooses his way of ignorance. Okay. So that's a long paragraph, and most of that's useless. Okay. I don't need most of that. Like 90%. Like the only useful thing, literally, we can cut out everything in this paragraph except for Julian is more of a racist due to the fact he chooses his way of ignorance. That's useful to me. That's actually the functional start of a good argument. We're saying like, okay, which character is more racist? Julian. Why is that character's racist worse? Well, we see in that last sentence. Well, he chooses his way of ignorance. That's actually a really interesting idea. That's really kind of, going to take me in a fun direction. Everything else here is just it's a waste of space. I would cross it off. I did cross it off for the student. I don't, all this fluff about racial standards of old America clash with progressive steps of the new, they're set pieces. Oh, no, that is clutter. That is useless writing. It had nothing to do with this assignment. This writer thinks that they're great, though. They think that they are doing so well and they've filled so much space. Well, they filled it with useless stuff that we need to take out because it has nothing to do with the argument and it's just so much clutter. So basically, one sentence in this is useful, and one sentence is actually going to be starting us in a useful direction. The rest, 100% needs to be cut. It's useless. Okay, number 3. Juliana mother is more racist than her son Julian. Notice I'm reading exactly what my writer has provided for me, and you can hear a lot of the grammatical errors. That's one of the reasons why reading something out loud can be very useful for finding your own grammar errors that might not pop up in, a read that you do silently, or even if you run something through Grammarly or God help us some ChatGPT edits. Reading something out loud is going to really make it easier to find stuff. There are several instances where she displays that she is. Some reason she is more racist than her son is that she is proud of her family lineage, racist roots, and slave owning. She believes that blacks were happier as slaves, thinks that blacks should rise on their own, and she gets upset when Julian sits by a black man on the bus. Compared to the minor reasons why Julian is racist, she shows her racism trumps the way Julian is racist. Okay, so which character are we arguing is more racist? Julian's mom. We know that. Why is her racism worse than his? We don't have an answer to that, do we? It's just like Julian's mom's so bad. But that's not a comparison. That's not telling me why is hers worse than his. We have that kind of compared to minor reasons. That's not an argument yet. So you need to really kind of sit down and think. You can't just say like, oh, so bad, so bad, so bad, so bad. Where this paper, came into, had a problem was in the comparison. It was just like, because if all you're doing is saying like, oh, she's so bad, she's so bad, she's so bad, why is what she is doing worse than what he himself is doing? This fell apart in the comparison because it was just, oh, it's also bad. Okay, number 4. In the story, Everything That Rises Must Converge, Julian and his mother have different perspective on race. Even though they are both racist on different levels, but they are ways Julian's mother shows she is racist and how she belittles black people. For example, proud of her ancestry, how her grandfather owns a plantation and had over 200 slaves. She also believes that black people would be better as slaves. The author describes Julian's mother as being a small-minded individual. This shows how Julian's mother was very racist and how she felt about black people. All right, so which character will this student be proving is more racist? Julian's mother. I'm gonna guess Julian's mother on this. It does seem to be where things are going. What is the basis of what makes one kind of racism worse than another? We don't have that, do we? We have, again, we're kind of going that direction of, oh, she's bad, she's bad. Here's a list of why she's bad. Why is that worse than Julian? What makes this? Where is the argument for me? This isn't anything. You can kind of notice how choppy this is. And it's just a laundry list of example, 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 but no interpretation or argument, really. Let's see, and we have that little reference to they are both racist on different levels, but there's no real exploration of what is Julian doing? Why is that different? Why is that, less problematic than his mother? Okay, here's number 5. Oh, here's a good one. The story Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor depicts a period when the common world view as very narrow. Times when the turbulent racial tension of the civil rights movement was high, and when the Jim Crow laws were ending and legalized segregation were seemingly beginning to end. This story represents an aspect of slavery we rarely hear about, the inside of white families divided by their ancestors' sins and old beliefs. This story highlights the racial tension redirected inward as two main characters experience racism in different ways. Everything That Rises Must Converge illustrates deeply rooted racism and its after effects in the South. So that's the paragraph this person wrote for me. It sounds fancy. Sounds awfully fluffy to me. Sounds like it's got a lot of stuff stuffed in it. Does it respond to the prompt? Is it an appropriate response to this assignment? No, it is not. Because, again, the question I'm asking you is, which character will this student be proving is more racist, Julian or his mother? I don't know. The person spent quite a lot of time describing a story in very detailed, heavy words, and no time at all actually saying, who are you going to say is more racist? How are you supporting that? No, there was just, it was nothing but endless fluff and clutter. What is the basis of the student's argument about what makes one racism worse than another? We don't have that because I don't even know who this person's going to argue is more racist. This is is basically, it is a very common problem that I see very often where people are just like, I'm just going to throw a lot of fancy words at her. I'm going to maybe pull some stuff from the internet that looks kind of fancy. Maybe this was taken from a description of the story. Maybe this was taken from summary. Maybe sometimes this is kind of thing I see from some generative AI occasionally. Though this one did predate generative AI. This is about 15 years old. So you guys, this is it probably this was probably from Spark Notes, to be honest with you. But it's not to the assignment. It's not appropriate. It can sound super nice. You can put a lot of extra words in. You can tell me all about history. That's certainly you can do that, but it's not to the assignment. It's not what I want. It's not clear writing, and it's not an appropriate response. So this person had to rewrite from scratch because there's nothing here that's actually useful. Let's see. Number 6 is hilarious. I'm not going to read each of these to you. I do encourage you guys to do all this. But number 6 is just a full-on summary of the story. Like, absolutely start to finish. It's just a full-out summary of the story. And I'm kind of reading through the whole thing. It's like, it's not a thesis paragraph. This is not what I'm asking you for. I'm asking you for, when I give you guys a homework assignment, I want you guys to focus in, and the only things you should be writing about are what is useful and appropriate to support your argument. If your argument doesn't, touch on Julian's mother getting hit in the face with a handbag, that's okay. Then I shouldn't be hearing about Julian's mother being hit in the face with a handbag because it's not relevant to your argument. When you are analyzing, when you are writing in this way, you aren't going to be giving us summaries. You are going to be focusing only on what helps your argument, what gives you more to talk about, what supports the direction you are going in. So that's, the difference between writing a book report and writing a college analysis. These are different. And so I encourage you guys to kind of keep looking forward through this. I do love a lot of these examples. These were things that students wrote and put a lot of effort into, and they are great examples of what some of these common pitfalls are, because you can see how few of these were actually setting our students up for success here. Like, because when I'm looking at that thesis paragraph, I have a very focused direction that I'm looking at. It's like, is this telling me where you're going? Is this an appropriate direction? That thesis paragraph is your blueprint, it's your guide. A good thesis paragraph, you should be able to look back to at all points and say, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm proving, this is what my purpose is in writing this homework assignment. I encourage you to look through this. It's a real, it's an assignment and an exercise I've used for a lot of years because it shows really well what we're looking for. Thank you so much.